These days, the problem with the word love is one of definition. People love their cars and love new fashions. But millennia ago, the Apostle Paul wrote the ultimate essay on love. After you master 1 Corinthians 13, you'll know what real love is and isn't. Today, more details on God's view of love, the kind He shows us, and the kind we're to show to others. From Chicago's Moody Church, this is Running to Win with Dr. Erwin Lutzer, whose clear teaching helps us make it across the finish line. We're in a series on finding where you fit. Turn with us to 1 Corinthians 13 as Dr. Lutzer comes again to tell us about the motivation of love. As we go verse by verse, we've come to verse 3.
Now, verse 3, really, I struggle with it. I think you will too. And if I give all of my possessions to feed the poor, and if I deliver my body to be burned, but do not have love, it profits me nothing. I look at this and I say, how can somebody who gives all of his possessions to feed the poor not be loving? I mean, there have been those in church history who have done this, and we hold them up as the quintessential example of what love is all about. And then there are those who give their bodies to be burned. In France, there were martyrs who were marched to their death, who sang so loudly that the world hired a band to drown out the sound of the people who were going to lay down their lives. And Paul says, I could give my body to be burned, and I could die at the stake, and still not have love. And I say, Paul, I thought that's exactly what love does. And Paul would say, now wait a moment, before you shout. He would say, you have to understand that it's even possible to do that with such a wrong motive that it's not loving, though it looks that way. And if I give my body to be burned, and if I give my possessions to feed the poor, Paul says, if I do not have love, I am nothing. Love is essential. It is necessary. Now in the next verses, Paul picks it up and says, love is special. Love is special. And certainly, by the way, he would say to us, if we, no matter how much we know, no matter how gifted we are, no matter how much we delight in the gifts of others, no matter how wonderful our worship service, and what a wonderful worship service we've had here this morning. But no matter how wonderful it is, if you do not have love, you are nothing, Paul would say. And now beginning at verse 4 and going through to the end of verse 7, Paul says that love is very special. It is extraordinary. You don't find this in the average office down in the Loop. You don't find this in the average home. This is something so unusual that, as we shall see, it is a gift of God. It has to be. And Paul doesn't define love. I wish I had said, Paul, there are all kinds of arguments going to happen in church history over what love really is. Why don't you give us a definition? Settle the arguments. But he doesn't do it. He just said, I want to describe it. And he gives us some behavioral responses of love. And here he lists quite a few. He begins with 2 positive ones. He lists 8 negative ones. And then on the other side, he comes up with 5 positive responses again. So let's just simply take them. First of all, love is patient. That means it's able to endure injuries without retaliation. Remember in 1 Corinthians 6, he's discussing the question of lawsuits, and he says, you Christians shouldn't be going into court with one another in front of a pagan judge. I mean, can't you resolve your own differences? And can't you even rather take wrong than to do something like that? Love is patient. It does not have to take another Christian to court to settle the score and to get that last dime. That's not love. Love is kind. It pays back with kindness that which was delivered in hurt. And then he begins that negative list. Love is not jealous. It delights rather in the success of others. Have you ever thought of the roots of jealousy in our hearts? And who of us has not been jealous? Who of us has not been willing to see someone who is above us in our company or in our ministry or whatever? Who of us has not secretly seen him fall and perhaps delighted in it? That's not love. That comes from somewhere else, but that's not love. Love is not jealous. Love does not brag. Oh, we've all met those people who draw attention to themselves, who say things that even may be true, but you listen to them and you say, spare me, spare me. Love does not brag. Love is not arrogant. We recognize that right away, and the reason we do so with such facility is because we look into the mirror several times a day. Love is not arrogant. Does not act unbecomingly. Now, what would that be? Well, Paul uses that word in chapter 7 of this epistle to refer to a man who might lead a woman along and then in the end not marry her. Give her the indications that he's going to and then turn around and having misused her. That's not love. Love doesn't use a woman towards its own ends. There's another word to describe that begins with the letter L. That's a 4-letter word, but it's not love. It's something else. That's not love. Love does not seek its own. It's not into it for its own interests. It's not just interested in its own selfish, narrow-minded, individualistic agenda. That's not love. Love is not provoked. And how easily we get provoked. At our day of prayer yesterday, somebody was praying and saying that, Lord, help us when we are in traffic not to get angry. There are people on the expressways who can provoke us if we aren't careful. But be very careful, especially if you have a Jesus bumper sticker. But love is not provoked. Love does not keep a record of wrongs, Paul says. It doesn't have this whole file folder that it can resort to, because if you do this and that, I can draw up this particular file and I can show you what you did back in November of 1992. That's not love. Love does not rejoice in unrighteousness. It doesn't delight in evil. It doesn't like to spread stories and gossip, even if the gossip is true, because did you know what so-and-so did? And I just can't believe it, but come to think of it, it is just like him. That's him. That's not love. That's something else. That's not, love doesn't do that. Paul says it rejoices with the truth. It bears all things. That means that when the going gets difficult, it keeps bearing it. It believes all things. Is it naive? It's not naive, but it does.